Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. Big surprise. Jason Momoa basically just announced that he is the new Lobo, and then James Gunn confirmed the news, welcoming him to the new DCU movies. So we'll break it all down, because I know everybody's been waiting to see if Superman is going to fight Lobo, if Jason Momoa is going to come back, because he's been talking about coming back as Lobo since before Aquaman 2 Lost Kingdom came out in theaters. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos, because this is just the beginning. Like, they're slowly announcing all the big new characters piecemeal. Jason Momoa's Lobo is just the first one, so we'll explain where he's going to show up first, when we're going to see him actually fighting Superman, Supergirl, like the other major characters that we know are going to show up in the DCU. But probably one of the funniest things, you might remember this, Jason Momoa talking about fanboying over Lobo for like 2 minutes straight. This is basically him calling his shot Babe Ruth style, saying that he was always destined to be Lobo inside the DCU.
Well, I originally thought I was going to be playing Lobo in the very beginning because I got called in. I auditioned for Batman, and I almost didn't do it because I was like, this is silly. It's not going to be me. Why am I auditioning for Batman? Right. But it was just a run-of-the-mill audition. Right. And then I get called in right after, and Affleck gets announced, and I'm like, of course I'm going to play the bad guy. Right. It's not too many guys that can kick the shit out of those two. Right, so I was like, yeah, I'll come in and beat him up, and die like I do. Sure.
Aww. Good dyer.
Yeah, you're a good dyer. Anyways, I got called in the office, and I was just like, well, do you know who you're going to play? And I'm like, yeah, Lobo. Yeah. Of course, he's the only one that can fight Batman and Superman. Anyways, yes, but so Lobo is. I used to collect comics, and I don't do so much anymore, but he was always my favorite, and I'm like, I always wanted to play Lobo because I'm like, hello, it's perfect role.
Isn't it funny how he said that even when he was going to be cast as Aquaman in the DCEU by Zack Snyder in the Warner Brothers Power of the Beat at that time, he said that he thought that it was kind of ridiculous, and he kept thinking when they were bringing him in to screen test for Aquaman, he thought that he was screen testing for Lobo. Like, the way they wrote the Aquaman character at the time sounded to him, like before he knew it was Aquaman, that it was going to be Lobo the whole time. What basically just happened, though, this morning is that James Gunn congratulated him on joining the DCU and also reposted his original statement from this actual interview here, where at the time, like, he hadn't been cast as Lobo at the time, but this was a couple years ago when he was talking about coming back as Lobo. James Gunn just made it official, saying, oh, now you are back. Like, now it already happened. The conversations already happened in like the last couple months. It sounds like what just happened the last couple months is that the ink on his new contract to come back as Lobo finally dried, but they'd been talking about it since before the Aquaman movie came out. Like, James Gunn had already been calling him, talking about this. When it comes to him fighting Superman, Supergirl, like all the other really powerful beings in the DCU that we know about, the first place we're supposed to see him is actually during the new Millie Alcock Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow movie. Because of the way things are being delayed and shuffled around, that's actually going to be the next DCU canon movie after the Superman David Corenswet movie. Tom King, who wrote the comic book that they're adapting for that movie, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, said that originally that book was going to be a Lobo story, like he was going to be a big character during that, but didn't wind up being a huge character by the time it came out. So it's sort of like they're tweaking the book the way it was supposed to be originally for the actual movie itself, which I think is kind of funny. And using that as the first place that we see him in live action is actually a huge Game of Thrones reunion, because most people will remember, Jason Momoa's done a ton of stuff, but mostly you remember him in terms of fantasy from the actual Game of Thrones universe as Khal Drogo back in the day. Millie Alcock most notably played the young version of Rhaenyra on House of the Dragon. And talk about 6 degrees of separation, the other connection between their characters in the Game of Thrones universe is that Daenerys, who was married to Khal Drogo briefly, actually comes from Rhaenyra's line along with Jon Snow. So Millie Alcock's Rhaenyra character is sort of like the great-grandmother-in-law many times removed of Khal Drogo. Keeping it in the Game of Thrones family, now inside the DCU. He's not meant to be the main villain of the Supergirl movie. They just said that he's going to show up for the first time in the Supergirl movie. Obviously, he's not going to die. Like, he'll be a much bigger character he'll go on and fight Superman eventually, all the other really big characters. Really early on, too, when we were still talking about Aquaman 2, back before it actually came out, and we were talking about him coming back, you remember during the Superman Man of Tomorrow movie, which is a spin on the Millie Alcock Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow movie, the comic book came after the actual movie, though. That movie details his life as early Superman, like Superman Year 1, and during that, one of his first big fights is against Lobo. Their fight does a good job of showing you, too, how hard it is for Superman to fight Lobo. Like, he's one of the few characters who can actually go toe-to-toe with Superman for a good long while. Now, ultimately, Superman still way more powerful than Lobo, but the problem is that Lobo fights dirty, so he has a way bigger advantage than Superman, who's willing to pull his punches. Things really don't get real until you actually piss Superman off, and he's like, okay, fine, that's it, I'm shutting this down right now. My assumption when it comes to him fighting Supergirl, the difference though is because Supergirl's power level is pretty close to Superman's, Supergirl herself doesn't hold back quite as much as Superman does, so their fight would be a little more down and dirty than say like his early fights with Superman. The other funny thing a lot of you probably saw in your feeds recently is that DC Comics just started dressing Lobo up as Aquaman for Halloween and making a bunch of Jason Momoa jokes. Those DC comic book writers know exactly what they're doing, like, haha, yes, Jason Momoa will soon be both Aquaman and Lobo, or he will have been Aquaman, but will be Lobo as well. But the Lobo character, probably one of the perfect characters for Jason Momoa to play. Most longtime comic book fans would probably say he should have always been the Lobo character. I think he did a fine job as Zack Snyder's version of Aquaman. Like, he can do the dark and stormy version of the character that he is in the Zack Snyder version of Justice League. And he can also do the himbo, super over-the-top, big dumb animal version of the character they did in the first Aquaman movie. Like, he has a huge range when it comes to, like, really dark and really silly over-the-top characters. But if you remember, the tone of those movies is just completely different. It's kind of weird how different they are. You can definitely tell they tried to pivot hard on the darker tone of Batman v Superman of the Justice League Snyder Cut with the first Aquaman movie. It was way sillier. Probably one of the other best examples of Jason Momoa being super over the top would be his Fast and Furious Dante character. Jason Momoa can do it all. The beauty of the Lobo character, though, is that he's sort of the midpoint between those different versions of Aquaman that he's been in the DC movies. Lobo is super dark, but at the same time, very, very over the top. Like a more toned down version of Jason Momoa's Dante character in Fast and the Furious. That's just a testament to how crazy he is in that Fast and the Furious movie. Let me know in the comments what you want to see from Jason Momoa's Lobo and which other characters besides the new Superman do you want to see him cross over with. The other big thing that's supposedly going on in the background is they're developing a Lobo spin-off movie too. That's been a thing for a while, like they've been trying to make a Lobo movie for a long time, and a rated R Lobo movie on top of that. Because if you're going to do a rated R movie, James Gunn is probably the right person to do it with, because he's already done the Suicide Squad as a rated R DC movie, so he's way more open to doing that more frequently than, say, someone like Marvel and Kevin Feige, who just started with Deadpool and Wolverine. Like, we're just starting to see more mainstream rated R comic book movies, whereas before it was more of a piecemeal kind of situation. And I've used a couple clips of this earlier, but like the only other time we've actually really seen Lobo in live action is the paramilitary Lobo Christmas special, which was a fan film from way, way back in the day. Like, we're talking many, many years ago. So shout out to that. If you ever see clips on, like, that's basically what that is from. Way back before Jason Momoa was originally cast as Aquaman, there were rumors at the time that he was almost cast as Lobo. This would have been 10 years or more ago, but the regime at Warner Bros. At the time didn't want to do rated R DC movies. They didn't care about the Lobo character. They only wanted to focus on the main Justice League characters because they were racing towards Justice League, and the Lobo idea was basically thrown away at the time. But this is just an example of how, at the time, the people who were developing these movies at DC way back in the day thought that he would make an awesome Lobo, so people had that idea a long time ago. And even though I'm not expecting them to do this, I kind of want to see how his Lobo would react to jokes about Aquaman in the fish stuff from Peacemaker Season 1. You remember, he literally met Peacemaker as his Aquaman character, who was paying off all the jokes about his character getting it on with fish. The way that James Gunn explains that, that's like the only scene from Peacemaker Season 1 that isn't going to be canon to the new DCU. All the rest of Peacemaker Season 1 will be canon to Peacemaker Season 2. And it is a bummer that Henry Cavill, Ben Affleck can't also come back as different characters. I know there's been a ton of people that are like, what if Henry Cavill is the guy under that black suit inside the Superman trailer? What if he's the evil clone of Superman? That would be amazing, but it wouldn't make as much sense. Like, his face would have to look like David Corenswet's face in order for that to really make sense. And the whole point of bringing Henry Cavill back is that you could actually recognize that it would be Henry Cavill coming back. The way that he talked about it when he initially announced that he was out as Superman a couple of years ago during the big James Gunn reboot, he said that there was a chance that he came back in the future, but didn't really explain exactly how that would happen. The easy way around that would be multiverse, and he's still his version of Superman from the DCEU, and they just explain that the DCEU is a separate universe from the DCU. But in order to do something like that, you'd have to do an actual big Crisis on Infinite Earths movie, and I don't know that they're so heavy on multiverse stuff right now. Like, we're slowly moving past the whole concept of the multiverse. Shout out to all the jokes during Deadpool and Wolverine where he was basically calling that out, like, can we just be done with the multiverse at Marvel and at DC? But let me know in the comments, Henry Cavill comes back as a different character in the DCU. Who do you want him to play? Like Jor-El or somebody else? Like, there are a number of characters that he could play very well. I know there's a bunch of questions about the Batman 2 being delayed. What's going on with Batman Brave and the Bold? Is Robert Pattinson just going to become the Batman of the DCU eventually? Like, is that what all these delays are really about? I will try to do a separate video about that later this week. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I'm still trying to catch up on just because there were like daily episodes from Marvel for a while that just finished. Normally the holidays mean you get a break, but nope, not for me. Apparently no breaks. I've already done a bunch of Superman trailer videos. Click here for those, and click here to learn about the new version of The Flash in the DCU. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.